I am Professor Ines Al-Mahallawi, Professor of Forensic Medicine and Clinical Toxicology. Today I am going to discuss with you identification. What is meant by identification? Identification is the recognition of an unknown person through certain features and characters that differentiate him from all others. This identification may be complete when I am able to make absolute fixation of individuality of a person, or it may be partial when this recognition is not complete, when there is recognition of some items while others are still unknown. We may be asked to identify an unknown living person in different conditions. For example, this: who am I? This is an amnesic victim who went out of his home, and then he forgot who is he and where is he going, and so on. So, who am I? This is the first condition where identification is needed. Also, who is my father? This child is asking, who is my father? When there is disputed paternity and the father is unknown. Also, whenever you write a report, you should know whom you are writing, for whom you are writing this report. Whether this report is medical or any other types of reports. Also, who is the rapist? When there is more than one assailant are suspected. Who is the killer? Who is the mother? When two mothers are alleging the maternity of a child, you should know or try to know who is the mother. You should identify the mother. And as I said before, who is the father in disputed paternity. There are certain steps for proper identification. As we have only two sexes, regardless of the area of intersex between the male and female, so it is logic to start with sex identification, as Dr. Marwa have discussed with you, as she has discussed with you. Now, after identifying the sex of an unknown person, I try to identify his age. I try to know the age of this unknown person. Also, I try to find when there is a disaster in a hotel or in a ship or in an aeroplane with multinationalities. Identification of the race of an unknown may help to identify the person. Also, I can identify the religion of the person, and hence I can identify the person. The most important are the congenital features that characterize this person regarding his stature, color of skin, color of eyes, hair, and the most important of these are the fingerprints and secondly the teeth prints. These are regard the congenital features. There are also acquired features like scar from a wound or in operation, or presence of tattoo, and so this may help in identifying a person. And lastly, and the most important, is the presence of genetic markers that can help me to individualize the person and make this identification complete. These are the steps for identification. As you know, observing our bodies, we have a skeleton which is covered with flesh and skin, and there is there are clothes on top, in addition to certain voice, certain gait, certain tics, and the photos of the person. Let us start with estimation of age from bones. When you look at our skeleton, we have a skull, and attached to the skull is the mandible carrying, and with the maxilla carrying teeth. In addition to the skull and the mandible and teeth, we have long bones, and we are going to examine what's called the ossific centers in the long bone and the union of epiphysis. Let us start with the skull. For the skull, to identify age from the skull, we will look for the dimensions of the skull, and this is important and helps in identification only of a full-term baby. But after that, it has no role that in identifying the age of a person. So we have a coronal dimension. In the full-term baby, we have the coronal dimension 4 inches, the anteroposterior dimension 5 inches, and the circumference dimension, which is 13 inches. Then we will look for the vault of the skull, and as you remember from the anatomy, we have anterior fontanelle and posterior fontanelle. The posterior fontanelle is closed at birth, and the anterior fontanelle is a membranous fontanelle which ossifies by the age of 2 years. So when the child is 2 years, the anterior fontanelle is closed. What's the importance of this age? You should know that any topic with medico-legal importance is very important. So what's the medico-legal importance of the anterior fontanelle? It means it helps to identify the age of a child. If it is ossified, this means that the child is 2 years. And what's the medico-legal importance of this age, of the 2 years age? When the child is 2 years and the mother is criminal and has to be executed, we can execute, she can be executed only when the child is 2 years old. So execution is postponed until the child is 2 years. Then we have sutures, which are serrations between the different bones of the skull. And these sutures, we say that these sutures are opened when there is a click between the two bones. Felt, this means that the sutures are not yet closed. The first suture to close is the frontal suture, which lies between the two frontal bones. So at 3 years, the frontal suture is closed and the two frontal bones become one bone, except in negroid races. It remains to be opened and it is called metopic suture in the negroid races. Then we have the sagittal suture between the two parietal bones. They are closed at 25 to 30 years old. And what's the importance of 25 years? What's the medico-legal importance of this age? It is the age we can be a member in the people assembly at this age. So when the sagittal suture is closed, I can introduce my name to be elected to be a member in the people assembly. Then the coronal suture is closed at 40 years. And what's the medico-legal importance of 40 years? It is the age of presidency in Egypt. At 50 years, the lambdoid suture is closed. Then we look at the base of the skull. There is a suture which is called basioccipital basisphenoid suture, which closes at 23 years in a male. All these ages are in the males. But if we know that what happened in males occurs in the female 2 years earlier. So when it is 23 in males, when this basioccipital basisphenoid suture closes in males, it closes in females at 21 years, which is the age of civil rights. Then we have the mandible. If you want to remember the anatomy of the mandible, we have the body of the mandible and the ramus, and in between there is the angle of the mandible. In the adult mandible, the ramus makes a right angle with the body, and there are teeth carried on the in the upper surface of the mandible. The problem is when I find the mandible to be obtuse angle and edentulous. What is meant by edentulous? Edentulous means that there is no teeth. So when there are no teeth carried on the mandible, and when the angle between the ramus and the body is obtuse, here there is a problem. I should differentiate, because this mandible may be related to an infant, so it may be an infantile mandible or an old age mandible. Both are obtuse angle of the mandible and edentulous with no teeth. How to differentiate between them? I should look for the mental foramen. If it is nearer to the lower border of the mandible, this means that it is an infantile mandible. Then it becomes, in the adult mandible, in the middle between the upper and lower border. Then, after falling of the teeth and the grinding of the upper surface of the bone of the mandible, it becomes nearer to the upper border of the mandible. So it is in the mandible of an old age person, the mental foramen is nearer to the upper border, and in the infantile mandible, it is nearer to the lower border of the mandible. Now, what about the medico-legal importance of teeth examination? I have 3 facts that we should remember. First, no teeth sets are alike, and thus it helps in identification. Secondly, teeth resist putrefaction, heat, and corrosive. Thirdly, teeth cause bite marks. If you look at the milk teeth, we have the central milk incisors erupt at the 6 months old age. So when the child is 6 months, he has 4 teeth, 4 central milk teeth in his mouth. At 9 months, the lateral milk incisors erupt. So at 9 months, how many teeth he has in his mouth? He has 8 teeth. Then usually the canine delays his eruption. So we go to the first milk molar that erupts at 12 months or at 1 year. So at 1 year or at 12 months of age, the child has 12 teeth in his mouth. The central, the lateral, and the first milk molar. Then the canines erupt at 18 months. At 18 months, the child has 16 teeth in his mouth. The central incisors, the lateral incisors, the first milk molars, and the canine, the milk canines. Then at 24 months, the second milk molars erupt. So at 2 years old age or at 24 months age, the child has 20 teeth in his mouth. At 2 years he has 20 teeth in his mouth. What else happened at 2 years? Let us remember. Yes, it is closure of anterior fontanelle, and as we just said, eruption of the second milk molars at the second year, when he is 2 years old. Now, what's the medical legal importance of this age? It is the mother. If the mother is a criminal and should be executed, this execution is delayed until the child is 2 years old. The child remains to have 20 teeth in his mouth until he is 6 years old. At 6 years old, the first permanent molars, the four first permanent molars, erupt behind the milk teeth. So how many teeth in his mouth now? They are 24 teeth. And what's the medical legal importance of the age of 6 years? It is school age. Then at 7 years old, the child starts to replace the milk teeth with the permanent teeth. So at 7 years, the permanent central milk incisors fall and the permanent central incisors erupt. And what's the medical legal importance of 7 years? It is age of discrimination. Before this age, the child cannot differentiate between right and wrong. At 8 years, the lateral milk incisors will fall, and instead the lateral permanent incisors will erupt in the place of the lateral milk incisor. So, how many teeth in the mouth of 7 or 8 years old child? They are still 24 teeth. Then we used to have the canine delays, the canines delay in their eruption. So we will jump over the canine, and where the first milk molar will fall, and instead the first permanent molar will erupt in place of the first milk molar. And now they are called, it's called the first permanent premolar, not molar, because we have the first permanent molar that erupted at 6 years. So it is the first permanent premolar that erupts at 9 years, and the second permanent premolar erupt at 10 years. So at 9 and 10, the first and second premolars erupt, because in their this is now is the place of the premolars, because we have the molars behind. Then the canine erupts at 11 years. So, how many teeth are present in his mouth? They are still 24 teeth. Then at 12 years, the second permanent molars erupt. So how many teeth in his mouth? They are 28 teeth at 12 years. And then the third permanent molar, or the wisdom teeth, erupt from 18 to 25 years. And they may not erupt at all. They may be mal-erupted. All these occur at 18 to 25 years. So, how many teeth? What in an adult person? They are 32 teeth. And if I asked you, milk dentition, the mouth has milk dentition up to 6 years. Between 6 and 11 years, there is mixed dentition. Both milk and permanent teeth are present in the mouth. Then after 11 years, all the dentition is permanent dentition. This as regards estimation of age from teeth. What about estimation of sex from teeth? If you look at the first molar, permanent molar, we find that the male permanent molars have 5 cusps, while the female first molars have 4 cusps only. So there is a difference between the male and the female teeth. Also from teeth we can identify the race of a person. If you look at the central incisors of the mongoloid race, when there is a disaster in a hotel or in a ship or with multinational persons, I can identify the race of a mongoloid race by looking at the central incisors. If there is grooving in the inside of the central incisors, what is called shovel-shaped incisor, it belongs to mongoloid race. Also, I can identify the occupation